My dad stole my identity and opened 3 credit cards in my name. He told me since I'm young, I can do without for a few years. I'm trying to buy a house and I'm freaking out. Jail, divorce, police, file a case. I don't understand parents who, this is not the first credit theft story I've heard from parents with a child, but unfortunately, it's not the last either. Continue. I found my dad used my information to open 3 credit cards over the last year. When I went to get a pre-approval for a mortgage, I was told by the lender they wouldn't be able to give me a home loan because of the defaulted credit cards. They also said I probably wouldn't be able to get a loan from any lender because of it and gave me a sheet of paper explaining what I need to do in order to fix it. When I tried disputing the cards, one of which is already in collections, the disputes got closed out as debts were verified. I told my divorced parents about it, and their answers were pretty wildly different. My dad said these things happen and that I should be more careful in the future with my social security number. Seeing as I've always been careful, that made me pretty mad. My mom says she thinks my dad might have something to do with it since him opening credit cards in her name had a part to play in their divorce. She told me he ran up about $50,000 in credit card debt on secret credit cards. A few days ago, I ended up casually telling my dad that I'm going to have to file a police report for the credit cards. He told me I probably shouldn't do that because $15,000 isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. When I told him it was keeping me from buying a house, he said I could just wait a few years until they fell off my credit report. He said it would only take another 4.5 years. When I told him I obviously couldn't wait that long, so I will have to file the police report, he straight up told me not to do it and just told me to be careful in the future. Once I told him I already got the paperwork together from the credit agencies, he told me he had opened the cards to pay for living expenses over the last year. He said his work slowed down a bit, but he'd do what he could to help pay it off. He said it would ruin his life if he went to jail. I'm leaning towards going to the police anyway, but I didn't right that minute. I have everything in front of me today to go make the report. I guess I just want to make sure turning it over to the police is the right thing to do, especially if I'm wanting to buy a house this year. Next sentence. Update. I went to the police. Any parent who is selfish enough to do that to their child deserves to go to jail. The process itself was pretty easy. I went to the police department and the person at the front desk had me wait about 10 minutes before an officer came out. We talked for about 15 minutes and he made copies of all the paperwork I gave him. He told me that the case would be assigned to a detective and gave me a pamphlet they have about how to contact the credit agencies. I was given a report number and was told I could use that now to start disputing the accounts. A detective is going to follow up with me in the next couple of weeks. I asked what would end up happening to my dad, and the officer said it looked pretty clear-cut to him, but the charging decision is 100% with the state attorney's office. He said if they decide to pursue charges, he'll likely get a warrant put out for his arrest. He also said typically if this is his first felony, he's probably going to get some sort of pre-trial diversion with court supervision or probation. He probably won't go to jail for years, but if he gets picked up on a warrant, he's going to spend at least a little bit of time behind bars. I've decided I'm okay with that because it's obvious to me he did this purposefully. He's never been arrested before, so hopefully this is a wake-up call for him. At the same time, he completely did this to himself. Am I wrong for making a nurse cry after she insulted my parents? I care for my parents, mainly my dad. He's had a stroke, quintuple bypass, aortic valve replacement, pacemaker, and his end-stage COPD, for which he's in the hospital often. The man has 9 lives. Recently, he went to the ER because his pacemaker's been beeping. It was the first time it had beeped, so it freaked him out, especially since he's had it less than a year. My dad's way of handling his so many trips to the hospital is to joke around with staff and downplay the seriousness of the situation. He does this to relieve his own nervousness and to keep my mom from getting too upset. He was being his usual self as he got hooked up to telemetry. We were all trying to keep things lighthearted. The ER has a machine that will run a diagnostic on the pacemaker. To use it, the nurse needed the model. My mom keeps a card in her purse for this very reason but couldn't find it. After a while of searching, she was approaching a panic attack. The nurse was sighing while my mom was getting increasingly upset. Finally, my mom found it and the nurse ran the diagnostic. The results don't come immediately. They are sent to the manufacturer, then the nurse has to call to get the results. While waiting, I went to the bathroom. As I was walking back, I passed the nurse's station and I could hear her talking to the pacemaker tech. She told the tech in an annoyed voice, "Yeah, this family is totally off. Like we were crazy people." I was stunned, so kept walking but was pissed by the time I got back to Dad's room. I didn't tell my parents what I heard because I didn't want to upset them. Turns out the pacemaker just needed an adjustment. Then Dad was discharged. At this point, I told the nurse that I didn't appreciate what she told the pacemaker tech. I told her that my parents were the kindest, least crazy people she could ever meet. They had been through so much, they just couldn't get super serious anymore for every potential emergency. She looked at me shocked, put her head down, and apologized. She didn't intend for me to hear it. There was an assistant in there too who just went wide-eyed and didn't speak. As we were leaving the hospital, my dad realized he forgot his wallet, so I went back to the ER to grab it. The nurse stopped me and was crying. She apologized again and said that she had a long day and was flustered by my mom's panicking and that she never purposely insulted a patient. I nodded and told her I'd pass her apology along to my parents. After we left though, I started feeling really awful. My first career was an RT in an ER, so I know it can get exhausting. I also know some patients can really be difficult to handle and remembered how my coworkers and I used to get frustrated. I further thought I was wrong to bring my complaint up with the assistant in the room, though I'm not sure where else I could have talked to her alone. It's been bugging me since, so am I the asshole? I think at the end of the day, right, we are human, but you're there for a job. And I know nurses have really, really difficult jobs and they have a spectrum of patients that they see daily, but at the end of the day, like, they're still humans and we make mistakes, and you just save that talk for when the patient leaves or when you're at home.
Am I the asshole for calling my sister cruel for her tattoo idea? Sis is 28. I'm a 26-year-old male. My sister, N, has always had a strained relationship with our parents, especially my mom. I am clearly not privy to the reasons because things are fine with me and my parents. When N went to college, she met her creative writing professor as a freshman, and they got close immediately. They would do a lot together and worked closely on a few different writing projects. N never specifically said this, but it was obvious to anyone who saw them interact that they had a substitute mother/daughter type relationship, which hurt my mom a lot to see. I always thought she'd grow out of it or that the professor would move on, but 10 years later, they were still very close. About a month ago, the professor died unexpectedly, and it devastated N. She was really depressed over the holidays, which of course was all in front of my mom and was a difficult reminder that N loved the professor as a mother way more than she ever loved my mom as a mother. She still talks to my parents and stuff, and they don't fight or anything, but N is very distant and doesn't tell them anything about her life beyond the bare minimum. My mom tried to comfort N, but N was doing her distant thing and didn't want comfort. Something unfortunate that happened to N is that when she got the call that she died, she was brewing tea, and in the shock of the news, she spilled the boiling water on her arm, which burned her kind of badly on her wrist. I think the burn was like on the borderline of second and third degree and definitely still looked pretty rough during the holidays. N said it was especially hard because in addition to the physical pain, every time she looks at it, she is reminded of the moment she found out that the professor died, which I totally get. I was on FaceTime with N, and she said that she talked about it to her tattoo artist friend, who said that the burn should be able to heal well enough to get a tattoo over it, and then excitedly told me about her idea, which is a type of flower that the professor gave her as a bouquet for her undergraduate graduation. My mom was so embarrassed that day because she didn't get N flowers, but the professor did, and N was parading them around so happy, and it was a reminder of their connection. I guess N and the professor exchanged these flowers for every special occasion like birthdays, etc. So now she wants to get a decent-sized tattoo in a highly visible spot of something that will remind everyone of the professor. I told N that this seemed really cruel to my mom, who already feels cast aside and like she's in exile from N, and that's without the constant permanent reminder. N kind of scoffed and said, quote, "I can't believe you think you have the right to tell me not to do this," called me an asshole and hung up, and is still not talking to me except for a very brief text saying congratulations for a promotion I just got. My parents aren't commenting. My dad said I should have just kept quiet even though he agrees, and my mom made no comment but seemed grateful that I stood up for her. I feel like I was just being protective of my mom, but am I the asshole?
I think it's very selfish to talk to your sister and be like, oh, that would actually hurt someone else's feelings.
It's not about them.
It's not about them at all.
Am I in the wrong for breaking up with my boyfriend in front of his friends over his girl bestie? We've been together for 8 months and official for 4. I love him honestly and everything was great. We met each other's family and friends and the whole thing. On Saturday, I was meeting with him and his friends and he was to introduce me to his best friend from college. Let's call her Karen. She came an hour and a half late and he refused to order until she was there. I wasn't very hungry, so I wasn't bothered at first, but then she came without any apologies or anything. She just nodded hi when he introduced us. The other 2 friends were with their girlfriends and they weren't very glad to have waited before dinner. Her explanation was that she got caught up in a game. We're all way into our 30s, by the way. Then she got a bit drunk and was all over my boyfriend. The first time she talked to me was to tell me, "I hope that you aren't like the other girls and get intimidated by our friendship." I was like, what? I don't get intimidated by other women. She insisted that she was the reason my boyfriend and all of his exes broke up. My boyfriend then interjected agreeing with her. I asked how so, and he said, jealousy, and some have given me an ultimatum, and I would never choose an insecure girl that I have known for 8 months over a friend who I've known for years. She was giggling the whole time. I was a bit yuck, and I said that women don't usually have problems with other women. You speak about this happening with multiple women. What are the odds that they were all wrong when there's a common denominator? She started laughing and saying that I was just like them, and my boyfriend, like I've seen him for the first time in his pathetic form, said, well, yeah, this goes for us too. If you make that ultimatum, then it's over for us too. I just said that he needn't worry because I'm better than playing pick me in my 30s, so I'm bowing out. I left the restaurant and transferred my part of the bill to him. Now he says I was in the wrong for breaking up without discussion, and to do it in front of his friends like that was embarrassing. His friends thought I did great, and they didn't think that I was in the wrong at all, and they were laughing and making burn sounds when I left, so he found it embarrassing.